It's March 2025 and I have travelled to Cambridge to the UK headquarters for JBL, whose amazing premises you can see there behind me. And I'm here to review their new Stage 2 loudspeakers with their new MA AV receivers. And what's interesting about these ranges of products is that they're separate, but they're also designed to be used together or work really well together. And I'm here to review full systems. And what's also interesting about them is that they're incorporating a lot of JBL's high-end audiophile technologies, but in products that are designed for modern, real-world living at more attainable prices. And some might even say they're designed to be soundbar replacements and much more. And the reason I'm here to test and review them is because JBL know I'm going to push them to their limits to see what they're capable of. And that only leaves one question. How good are they? Let's go and find out. I am sat in one of the demo rooms here at the JBL UK facility. And the reason I'm doing the reviews here is because it's very difficult for me to review full systems like I have been at home. But I want to clarify that I have been reviewing two different systems across several days, so I've spent a lot of time with them. I've also set the systems up fully myself, and I've even brought with me my own media source so I can review these systems with as familiar conditions as possible. And that is why I've been reviewing and looking at two different systems, because one of them is aimed at somebody more like me, a die-hard audiophile who's used to, very large systems delivering very big home cinema performance. And the other system is actually aimed at somebody who maybe wants a better audio solution than a soundbar, or a solution that is much better than any soundbar can deliver really, but without going crazy in terms of box count and cost. System 1 has been a 5.1.2 system, and that means 5 surround speakers, 2 Dolby Atmos speakers, and a subwoofer. As the front left and right speakers, I have been listening to the Stage 260F tower speakers, and these have dual 6.5-inch polycellulose ribbed for your pleasure cone woofers that look very robust and intended for serious business. They have a 1-inch anodized aluminium tweeter, but this is a JBL speaker, so it sits behind what's called a second generation HDMI waveguide. So it's not a horn speaker, but the waveguide is there to control the high frequencies as they leave the speaker for a better sound quality. I prefer the look of the light finish of speaker, or latte as it's called, more than I do the darker finish of the speaker or espresso, some very fancy names. When you look at the rear of the speaker, you first notice the unusual design for a port. That's called the dual flared racetrack rear firing tuned ports. That's the great name for a speaker's port, I have to say. Maybe more interesting for many is the speaker cable binding posts that allow you to more easily use the Stage 240H up-firing speakers for Dolby Atmos. And I think it's clever to integrate the cable runs essentially into the speaker to make the user's life easier. The 260F is a pretty substantial speaker that I think looks nice, grills on or grills off, because the grills are nice also. And the 260F cost £525 each speaker, so very reasonable, all things considered. The most important speaker of a large system like this is of course the center speaker, and here it's the Stage 245C. And it features much of the same driver technology as the 260 tower speakers, but with a quad 4.5-inch driver array, so it's quite a wide but fairly slim center speaker. And it has the same 1-inch tweeter behind the HDMI waveguide. And the Stage 245C costs £449, and I think that's an extremely reasonable price, again considering what it can do. For the side surround speakers of this system, it's been a pair of Stage 240B speakers on their dedicated stands. The speakers share the same driver technologies. They use a 4.5-inch woofer with the same tweeter and waveguide, and they look very nice for the price, £329 for the pair, so amazing value really. The dedicated stands I'm not 100% on. I think they look very nice, and £199 for the pair is maybe a little pricey compared to the speakers. But it's the stand base that is very large, and I know that is important for stability, but it does make the whole thing look very bottom heavy if you ask me. The second most important speaker of this system is the subwoofer. And here I've been listening to the smaller of the two subwoofers in the Stage range, the 200p, that uses a 10-inch polycellulosed ribbed driver again, and it's driven by a built-in 150 watt RMS and 300 watt peak amplifier. This is a ported subwoofer with controls on the rear for setting the crossover, the power level and the phase. And I think the 200p looks really nice with the oversized white baffle, again grills on or off, and it costs £499, and there are a number of very good subwoofers available at that price range, but none that would visually match the speakers as well as this, if that is important to you. The last two speakers of the system are the Stage 240H, and they are a multi-purpose speaker. They can be a dedicated up-firing Dolby Atmos speaker designed to fit on top of the 260F tower speakers. And you guessed it, they feature the same design of drivers, a 4.5-inch woofer with the same tweeter and HDMI waveguide. But what's cool about these speakers is they can be selected to be used either as up-firing speakers, or they have a switch with a fitting on the back to be used as surround speakers or as a height speaker, which is very cool. And I think they look nice for a speaker of this type, which is a hard speaker to make look nice. And they cost £489 for the pair. So the total cost of the speakers in System 1 is just over £3,000. And I think it's a fairly reasonable sized system for this size of room. But you could make the system smaller and more affordable, or bigger and more fun with other speakers that are in the Stage 2 range. Then for the amplification of System 1, I have been listening to the flagship AVR of the JBL MA range, the MA 9100 HP, which is the model I would choose because of its power and key features, one being its Dirac Live Ready. And I think it's not only a very nice looking unit, especially in the light finish that matches the speakers of course, but it feels a lot more modern than a typical home cinema AV receiver big black box. And I like the big knobs on the front. I mean, who doesn't like to handle a big knob? But I really like the subtle JBL orange color accents and the modern screen. And I do like the look of the front fascia. It's clean but quirky, but I wish the volume wheel had more resistance to its motion. It's a little loose, being honest. One cool visual feature that you won't see very easily in this video until I do this, dim the lights, is the color glow on the underside of the unit. However, if you're a gamer and you're Team Sony, you might want blue, and you can have that. The same for Xbox green or Switch red and a few other colors. It's a small thing, but a nice one. Around the back, you can see the JBL is a 9.2 channel AV receiver, and it supports Dolby Atmos, DTS:X sound formats, as well as Dolby Vision and HDR10. There are many HDMI inputs, 3 that are HDMI 2.1, so support 8K 60 and 4K 120, and VRR and VLLM I think are important for some gamers. Great for convenience is the HDMI EARC support, and I also like the simplicity of the rear panel. There are only the connections that you need and hardly any that you don't. And there are 9 channels of amplification built in that are Class D powered, with a claimed 140 watts into 8 ohms for 2 channels driven that doubles to 240 watts into 4 ohms, and that is impressive. But I am not sure about the power for all 9 channels driven, as I couldn't find that information on the website. But there was plenty enough for this speaker system, and that's most important. For streaming music, you can stream it straight from the JBL with Spotify Connect or Tidal Connect or AirPlay 2, Chromecast and Bluetooth. And if you listen to vinyl, you might be happy to know that there is a moving magnet phono stage built in here. And as I mentioned before, it's Dirac Live ready, and I tested the hell out of that, and that includes bass control as well. But you will need to buy a license to use Dirac. It's not included in the price. And the JBL 9100HP, mouthful that is, costs £1,899. So a chunk of money, but I do think we are getting a lot there for that money. But that takes our total System 1 cost to just over £4,900. So that is a serious chunk of money, and that means my expectations are very high for the system. So System 2, remember, is intended to be a soundbar alternative, or maybe the next step on from a basic soundbar for someone. And it's a 2.1 system using the Stage 250B speakers, so similar to the 240B, but with a larger 5.25 inch woofer. And they cost £399 for the pair. And this system was paired with the same 200p subwoofer, but this time it was using a much more affordable JBL AV receiver in the MA 510. So this is a more simple system, and I think you can see that with the screen on the MA 510 being more basic. Although I still think it's a nice and modern looking AVR, but I still prefer the light finish to the black. And we do get less power and less features here. And round the back, you can see that it's only a 5.2 channel system, which is enough for most people. And there is no phono stage here and no Dirac Live, but you do get the auto EQ system called Easy EQ, and that will use your phone to do the measuring and calibration. And you will still get the same streaming options to play music straight from the JBL using Spotify and Tidal Connect, AirPlay 2, and you still get HDMI 2.1 inputs with the same gaming support and EARC. So a lot of the same stuff as the more expensive 9100 HP, but the 510 has a much lower price of £699. So the total cost of System 2, which includes the speakers, the dedicated stands, the subwoofer and the AVR, comes in at just under £1,800. And that might seem like a lot of money for a soundbar alternative, but there are many soundbars out there that cost £2,000 or more. So actually, it's not. But that does mean that my expectations were again very high for the performance of this system. For the sound quality of System 1, I spent a good amount of time listening to System 1 just in stereo, or really using the surround 2.0 mode. That meant I was just listening to the Stage 260F for music, for hi-fi music playback. And I was using for the music source my Zidu UHD 8000 media player. So I was listening to music that was saved on its internal hard drives and also streamed music from Cobas. And I connected the Zidu to the JBL AVR using a HDMI cable so that I was using the built-in DAC of the JBL. And I was very surprised by how clean and smooth the system sounded, with a strong or robust overall sound delivery. The Stage 260s certainly deliver a substantial amount of very good quality music bass, and they have quite a thick sound in the mids and vocals, so that gives them a bit of extra warmth and character. And the highs are a little mixed. Sometimes they are more forgiving, other times lively. It depended on the music. But overall, I found their music delivery to be really quite pleasing. And once I'd did a little bit of messing around with the speaker's positioning in the room, I was able to get a very impressive soundstage that was coming out full width in the room. It was also coming out a long way to me at the main listening position as well. And with some music, there was a nice amount of see through the speakers onto the music, so some depth to the sound quality or the sound playback or the soundstage as well. And all in, I was quite happy with the music performance, but I did notice as I started to push the volume up, the system seemed to lose some composure, but I thought that is possibly this room. Because this demo room, it might be difficult to see on camera, but this is quite a large room, actually with an extra high ceiling. It's got a high ceiling in here, and you can probably hear it in my voice because the microphone is just up here. Yes, there is some acoustic treatment in this room, but it's very minor. This room is still very lively, it's still very reverberant. So I knew that would be affecting the sound of the system some, and I knew that I would be able to take the system sound quality much further with Dirac Live. And for those of you who might not know me, I have worked as a professional Dirac Live calibrator for a number of years. I've calibrated systems for people all over the world. So I am very good and very experienced with using it. And calibrating Dirac in the JBL AVR was the same process as with any AVR. The Dirac workflow is always the same. However, I always take things further by tweaking the system settings after Dirac to push the system sound much further. And I could do that here with the JBL. But I have an exceptionally high expectation level from any system that I calibrate. And usually with other brand AVRs, I can achieve that expectation every single time. So could I hit that very high expectation of standard of sound with this JBL system? And I would say about 95% yes, but I need to clarify that statement because the system could do it, the gear could do it, but this wouldn't necessarily be the configuration of system that I would use in a room this size. But I have to say, the center speaker is really excellent. It sounds clean, clear, fast, and not once did I find myself struggling to hear the vocals, despite when you are meant to in movies like Star is Born. And actually, I was mega impressed by the quality of the music in that movie, as there is a lot of singing in different scenes with different microphones, and I could easily hear the nuances of that because the center speaker is very clear and dynamic sounding with a nice timbre as well, and no excessive sibilance, which can drive me crazy. So the center speaker definitely exceeded my expectation for what it costs. And I deliberately worked the 260s hard as front left and right speakers set to large, so I could stress them and the AVR for driving them, and both handled very dynamic, big scale, vivid scenes from movies like Across the Spider-Verse and Ready Player One played very loud. I didn't notice any compression in the amplifier either, where the sound starts to harden up as you're nearing its power limit. Everything was fine here in that regard, so that clearly shows I was not anywhere near its limit, which is very impressive considering how loud and how much I was pushing the system. And the height speakers surprised me too for adding just that extra bit of soundstage information or sense of soundtrack height in the room, without me once hearing the sound obviously coming from the front of the room. And the reflectivity aspect worked well, although I still think it's better to have speakers installed on the wall up high instead if that is possible. The 200p is a good subwoofer too, with a tight and controlled bass delivery in the main that was not bum cheek wobbling or denture removing in its bass output, but it was able to keep up with the rest of the system, not only for the scale of movies, but also for the warmth and pressure needed to tie the whole system's sound together. Its bass output is not massive, but it's not aggressive either. It delivers a nice quality of bass that is fairly transparent for not sounding easily localizable in the main again. However, being honest, with this size of room, I definitely would have taken advantage of the two subwoofer outputs on the 9100 HP. Even though they are a summed mono signal, I feel like this size of room, this size of system could definitely have benefited from a second subwoofer, and how I could have calibrated that to add some extra wallop, bass wallop at times would have been really beneficial. And I think, look, two subwoofers or dual subwoofers is always the best way to go in any size of room, if you can. And also in a room this size, I think a larger speaker at the rear or another set of speakers at the rear for side surrounds and back surrounds would have been an advantage. I actually think another pair of 260s at the back would have been great for more rear of the room sound presence and scale. However, the smaller 240B is probably a more real-world choice for most people, and they still did a good job as rear speakers. And I definitely think having all of the speakers have pretty much all of the same drivers is definitely an advantage for the whole sound field, like the immersion of sound field, because you're less able to localize and hear where the speakers are in the room, because that's not what you want. You just want to hear sound. You don't want to hear speakers. And when sound is panning around and when speakers are working in pairs or in fours or working together to create the sound field, having all the same drivers is definitely an advantage. And the JBL AVR did a great job of powering all of these speakers with no issues at all. When I had it up very loud, played for hours, and it didn't miss a beat, so that is all good. Also, the surround processing and sound steering was very good too. The 9100 HP definitely sounds fast and clean as an AVR. The transient clarity is really very good without it sounding too lean, but I did find that lowering the treble by 1 dB in the tone controls made for a smoother and nicer overall listen, and that was easy to do within the menu. Finally, I went back to listen to more 2-channel music, now with my Dirac calibration engaged, and I used the 2.1 surround mode to bring the subwoofer into the stereo mix as well. And the sound was now much clearer and had more 3D pop in between the speakers. And I could play music at any volume now within reason, and there was no sound composure issues at all, showing that it was the room causing the issues and not the system. And music did sound very good like this, but being critical, it does still sound like AV doing music because it is an AV system doing music. It doesn't have quite the same sound flow and maybe character as very good hi-fi, but I think it will be close enough for most people with all the benefits that come along with having an AV system. And I have found myself really liking the Stage speakers. They just seem like, excellent value for money for me. They've exceeded my expectations for what they cost. Yes, they're not perfect, but they don't sound dull or boring like some very affordable speakers can. They're still quite a lively, quite an exciting speaker system to listen to. And the JBL MA AVR, I found very easy to get used to its menu system. Although I do wish the menu system was a little snappier, though it does feel a little slow to move around at times, and also a little bit cumbersome to be in and out of certain options. And I do like having the menu come up on the screen, but I do wish the box it's in wasn't quite so big in the top left-hand corner, because sometimes I wanted to make setting adjustments while watching the content, but I couldn't see the content because the box was so big. Us reviewers were never satisfied and never happy. So summing up System 1, it's a very capable system for movies or TV shows or gaming, I'm sure, giving you a very high level of performance, much more than I expected for the money. So listening to System 2, you might think that would be a massive step down. And to my surprise, it really wasn't. It was eerily similar at first. And that is a good sign that the range of speakers all have a similar sound characteristic. And I didn't listen to System 2 as much as System 1, but I did listen to quite a lot of music with it, with and without using the built-in auto EQ system called Easy EQ that runs as an app on your phone. And to complete this, it's a very easy process with instructions of what to do. And if you are an Apple phone user, then you're fine to use your phone straight as it is. But if you're an Android phone user, because obviously all the phones are different, it's suggested that you use this Dayton measurement microphone that just plugs in USB-C to your phone. And it's the IMM6C, and I think it costs around £50. And it only takes about a minute to do, where you move your phone around the listening area. And there are a few parameters you can choose between. I choose to have more bass than average, of course. And this EQ system did a much better job than I thought it would. And the sound after Easy EQ, the bass was not as tight, articulate as you can get from Dirac Live. However, I tested with it on and tested with it off, and to me it sounded better with it on, so that was enough for me to be happy with the fact that it's included for free. System 2 did a lot of the same things as System 1. Yes, the soundstage was not as big or as grand, and it didn't quite come out into the room in quite the same way, but it was close for music. Movies did not sound as immersive or as impactful, but they were still impactful and engaging and clean and clear sounding with good dynamics. I could hear where the 510 didn't have the same control and composure at louder volumes as the 9100 HP does, because the sound was a little shouty, but we are talking a small amount here when played very loud. And I took the same approach where I lowered the treble by 1 dB for a smoother, nicer listen. And I could hear voices and vocals clearly in the middle of the soundstage for everything that I watched, which is impressive considering there is no center speaker. And again, the system exceeded my expectations overall, and it was close to the big system. And I've never heard a soundbar get even remotely close to a bigger home cinema system before. And that is all I needed to know about System 2. So being critical of myself here, I've done as much as I can with these systems in the time that I've been here. As I say, I've been testing them for several days. But the fact that there's so much to do in that period of time, and the fact that I am at JBL's facility, meant I couldn't compare to other manufacturers' systems to kind of give you that side-by-side comparison. So please do factor that in for this review. So I hope this very long, detailed review has been helpful for you. If you've enjoyed it, please hit the thumbs up and definitely subscribe to the channel to see more.